Welcome to Redefining What's Possible, your guide to assistive technology in Australia. Join us as we explore practical applications of AT, featuring expert interviews and the latest industry insights to enhance your professional development and to improve client outcomes. Welcome to this episode of the Redefining What's Possible podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Uncle. I'm the National Clinical Education Manager from ILS, and I trained as an occupational therapist. And today I am joined by two international guests. They are both from the International Registry of Rehabilitation Technology Suppliers, also called iNRRTS, and their names are Andrea Madsen and Weesie Walker. So Andrea is the Executive Director of iNRRTS, and she has over 20 years of experience as a complex rehab technology supplier professional, both with adults and with pediatric populations. She is a RESNA certified assistive technology professional and has held the iNRRTS CRTS designation and brings more than a decade of leadership through her service on the iNRRTS Board of Directors. And Weesie. Weesie is the former iNRRTS Executive Director and the former CRT supplier with over 25 years of experience providing complex rehab technologies to children and adults. Weesie was an early NRRTS registrant and was awarded the Simon Margolis Fellow Award. So I want to warmly welcome you both to the podcast today.
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, you're welcome. And you guys are coming to us from the US. And it's late afternoon for you, and it's, early morning for myself. So it's very different times of the day. And we've just sort of talked about the fact that it's winter here and summer there and kind of in opposites. But for you to come and join us and spend time talking with us today, we really appreciate it. So thank you. So the first question I want to ask today, because a lot of our listeners would never have heard of iNRRTS before, it would be completely foreign to them. So I wanted to ask you to share the story of how iNRRTS, it used to be called NRRTS, and was founded and what inspired its creation.
Well, certainly. NRRTS was established back in 1992 in response to a lack of standards, a lack of certifications, and a lack of any type of qualification requirements for suppliers in the provision of wheelchairs and seating. So at that time, there were fewer equipment options. There were minimal documentation requirements. There were no complaint processes and no codes of ethics. Essentially, anyone would be providing this critical equipment. So since its founding, NRRTS has been instrumental in setting and upholding high standards in the complex rehab technology industry and has continued to evolve, becoming iNRRTS in early 2024 to better reflect our international registry of CRT supplier professionals.
So which countries have you started working with beyond the US?
We presently have registrants, again, in the US where we were founded, in Canada, in Australia, and in Colombia.
Fantastic. So I know with the CRT, so the supplier certification program that you guys run, and I keep saying CRT thinking that all our listeners will know exactly what that means, but it's complex rehab technology because we don't often use that term here in Australia, but that's what we're talking about. So how have you seen that support both new and experienced professionals in the field?
Well, the certificate program that you're referring to is, there's always been the need for it. And I was trying to give you an exact date, but I think it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, the board decided that we were going to have to create this program to educate new people, bringing them into the field. And there were two reasons. One was that there was a shortage of qualified people. And the other was that we were seeing a greater need for qualified people. And the board was convinced that our organization was the best one to put this body of information, education together. And NRRTS has always been focused on education, continuing education, because that's what makes us the best at what we do. staying abreast. So we developed this content with subject matter experts that were clinicians and suppliers. We worked with a professional learning design person to help guide us on how to set this up. And we, as it has evolved, we realized that we can't really consider ourselves a profession if there's no standardized foundation of knowledge that every person uses working with clients. And as my friend Jean Minkle, who is one of our subject matter experts at the beginning, said, it's to teach people to know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And and that sounds maybe silly, but it's the truth, because every day you're learning something new, you're seeing something new, you're being challenged with something new, and no one can know it all.
Yeah.
And so as a professional, you would be able to draw the resources that you need to help you get the best outcome. And that's how you provide client-centered service.
Yeah.
And that is the utmost importance.
So important. And a lot of the clients we work with who require assistive technology, they are complicated. It's complex. And you're right, knowing that the people that are involved in the prescription of assistive technology, to know they're credentialed and they've been trained, because it is complicated. And it's something that I want to take my hat off to iNRRTS for what they have put together. And I've been really lucky that I've been able to actually do the first 6 courses, and the quality of the education is so high. It is so useful and applicable. So it's enjoyable to complete. I've really enjoyed going through, and a lot of it was just reinforcement of what I already knew, and a lot of it was new. And that's the thing, in this industry, you're always learning, right? Like you don't stop learning. And so, yeah, it's been a really, really wonderful addition to my career, is to be to sit and do some of that program. It's been wonderful. So thank you. So we've just been talking about sort of formal credentialing of assistive technology professionals. How does that impact the quality of assistive technology service delivery for clients at the end of the day?
Well, in my mind, I assume you've worked on both sides as the clinician and the supplier.
Yeah.
And a supplier should offer the resources that make the team complete, right? Between the clinician, the client, and the supplier. And so we focus on giving people the medical terminology,
Mhm.
understanding diagnosis,
Mhm.
and how some expected progression of diagnosis, and how you look at the environment of someone and make sure that the individual who's doing this understands that just because this person and this person have the same diagnosis, they may have very different needs
Yeah.
when it comes to environment, function, what have you. And so we're really focused on that individualized, take your time, do everything you need to do to make the best outcome for your client.
Well, having had access to that type of training, it really does, it reduces errors, it reduces inexpensive and long term complications that can be caused by improper equipment or improper fitting of equipment, or a lack of qualified instruction in the proper use of equipment. So, when you have someone who really has that understanding of how to marry an individual's goals and physical presentation and their lifestyle with the most appropriate equipment intervention, you end up having the best possible outcome.
And that's what we all want, right? Like everybody in the room, that's our goal. We want the best possible outcome. And I know, like here in Australia, we have a lot of issues with equipment being abandoned. Like it just ends up collecting dust in the corner or becoming a good clothes rack. Um, do you have the same sort of concerns there in the US, or have you seen that with the credentialing that you have now, have you seen that become a lot less because equipment is sort of more fit for purpose, really, because of the people involved are qualified and credentialed in what they do?
Well, definitely. When you have someone who's able to fit the equipment appropriately, who is able to hear and understand the needs of the individual up front going into the process, you have a lot less issue with equipment abandonment, and you have a greater satisfaction from the client that their needs were met, that their needs were heard and valued, and that they're receiving ultimately what they want, not just what we know is clinically the safest and the most appropriate, but what they want and what helps them to reach their full potential.
Yeah, because sometimes their goals are different to the clinician's goals. And it's so important they are heard and that their goals are, what we all achieve, like aspire to achieve. I think often our goals are a nice symmetrical posture, and someone else's goal is they just want to be able to get out in the community and have a good time going out with their friends in their wheelchair and have independence. And that's ultimately what our goal needs to be as well, rather than clinically making sure everything looks perfect, because it's not, things aren't perfect. It's not a perfect world. But the client's goals being number one focus is, in my mind, too, the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then if they abandon the equipment, it's on them, right?
Yeah.
Because you're giving them the final say.
Yeah.
And that's an area that suppliers need to know how to handle that, how to, you know, uh, that they don't agree with what you think is best, how do you handle that? What's the best way to handle that?
Yeah.
And so that's important, very important.
Yeah, it is. And complicated too. Yeah, can be. So with the credentialing you've achieved, with iNRRTS, how does that help uphold like ethical standards and professional accountability in the sort of assistive technology provision in the industry that we're in?
So, iNRRTS plays a critical role in upholding ethical standards and professional accountability in assistive technology provision, particularly within the field of complex rehab technology or CRT. Uh, we achieve this through adherence to the NRRTS Code of Ethics, our standards of practice, and through our transparent complaint resolution protocol, which together this creates a comprehensive framework for responsible and ethical service delivery. Becoming an iNRRTS registrant isn't merely a professional designation. It's a commitment to ethical conduct, to evidence-based practice, and accountability, which gives stakeholders, especially the people who are relying on assistive technology, the confidence that their provider is qualified, principled, and subject to ongoing oversight, which helps to safeguard the integrity and quality of their service delivery.
It's wonderful. And you know what? I'm thinking about everything you're saying and the need for that here in Australia. So if you look at the credentialing landscape in Australia versus the US, what do you know about what we have here in Australia versus the US, and what opportunities for growth do you see in Australia?
Andrea and I discussed this earlier, and I wanted to share with you that I live in Georgia, in LaGrange, Georgia. And before NARTS, there were no standards, as we've already addressed. And in the states, every state has a Medicaid program that covers disabled and elderly population. And so we work very closely with that program. And the program director learned about NART. I would like to take credit for this, but that wouldn't be truthful. She learned about it on her own, and she wrote it into her policy that any CRT supplier in Georgia had to be a NARTS registrant. And it was the first state in the US to adopt that. And so my own personal experience, this is what I saw. There was a lot less fraud
Yeah.
and abuse. Um, there was it brought all the suppliers together in a network that we were all part of the registry. And so we got to know each other, and we would meet at certain times to discuss issues. But more importantly is that the Medicaid program looked at us as a resource, and we're a great resource, but people don't always see it that way. And so for one example, they decided they wanted to cover standards for children.
Mhm.
And the range of pricing is from a few $100s to thousands of dollars. And they didn't know what made one better than another. And so who do they call?
Yeah.
Us.
Yeah.
And we would bring the product in, show it to them, go over it. And it was a wonderful experience for everybody. And I really felt like we were all on the same page. We're trying to preserve this precious funds that we have, and not waste it, but get people what they needed in the highest quality um, products. And and that was about 25 years ago, and it's still that way today. Obviously, the landscape of suppliers has changed tremendously. There aren't all these small providers anymore,
Yeah.
but it's still it's the idea that we're all in it together, and we're working together, and we have a common goal that we're trying to achieve. And I think a lot of great board members for NARTS have come from Georgia. And as people got involved, and I will share this. At first, people were like, one more thing I have to do. But once they got involved in it and saw how it benefited them personally with all the education that we offer, it slowly opened people's eyes. And I wish that we could do that everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, because when people don't get the best outcome, they don't always even know they're not getting the best outcome.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think that's sad. It's kind of sad.
Yeah.
The Medicaid program, they would also sometimes they would be looking at something that was submitted for approval. They may not fully understand what what the components are, or what it would do, and they could take all the pertinent information off of it and send it, and have one of us just look at it and say, does this look right to you?
Yeah. Very much so. It becomes a real team approach, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So here in Australia, we don't have any formal credentialing required for our assistive technology professionals. And hearing the benefits of what that's done in the US just makes me think that surely in the future it's going to be the way we're going to go as well.
Of
It has to
course,
be.
it has
Yeah,
to.
it
Yeah.
has to. So, in terms of emerging trends or technologies in our industry in assistive technology, what are you most excited about? And what do you foresee changes coming globally in our industry in years to come?
When I think about this, I initially um, get excited about the integration of more broadly available technologies. For example, Bluetooth being applied to assistive technology, specifically within CRT, um, allowing users to have greater access to their home environments, to the devices in their home, without the barrier of having multiple interfaces or multiple switches or things that are harder to access. Reducing those barriers and increasing their functional independence. Um, but I'm also very excited about, as we were talking about the Australians who have joined our iNRRTS community and bringing together sort of this global community of AT, CRT professional suppliers to be able to share their challenges and their successes, to be able to share their insights and education, I think is something that I'm most excited for, to be able to kind of share all of these things that are common between us. We might have different geographic areas we serve, different ages of populations, maybe a little different product offering. But at the end of the day, when we're working to improve the lives of individuals, we're all kind of fighting the same battles, seeing the same challenges. And it's great to be able to share those things and really be able to help and support one another.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Weesie, in terms of what's emerging?
Again, Andrea and I talked about this. So I've been out of the field for almost 12 years now, so I'm not up on technology. But I do think that an opportunity to be able to diagnose problems with chairs, online or what have you, is that's significant. And I hopefully we'll start seeing more crossover from our all this technology that we use every day. Can cross over into our field. A lot of it has, I know, and just the exciting. I did a lot of alternative drive power chairs, and I do if I'm in an exhibit hall, I will go by and just take a quick. I don't want to, I don't need to know all the detail, but I think everything is very exciting right now. And one of the things that we teach in this course is that really it's our imagination that limits what we can do for people.
Yeah.
And I've seen some really creative things come about from a particular person's need, and I don't know of anything that could be more rewarding than having the capability of providing that for someone.
Yeah.
And whether it's from your own effort or the team that you assemble to get that person what they need. Um, and as all the 20 something years I provided CRT, a lot of those people I worked with them the whole 20 some odd years. You develop that relationship with people,
Yeah.
and that's it's an amazing benefit to what we do.
And that's why the job satisfaction, right? Like it's the best when you've worked with someone for 20 years and you've seen that your work has improved their quality of life and they become your friends. That's so rewarding. And I love that about our industry. It's so rewarding. It's hard and challenging sometimes, but gosh, some days it just feels
It
so good
is.
to go to work. It really does. Yeah, that's so good. So for the OTs and the physios, or you would call them PTs here in Australia, who
Mhm.
the ones that are passionate about advancing their practice with assistive technology, um, what advice would you give them in terms of the credentialing that we're talking about and working with suppliers?
I think I think you offered some excellent advice when you talked about the certificate program because in the U.S. There obviously clinicians will start off working on the clinical side and then come to the supplier side, and you can appreciate that the knowledge base is similar, but there are other things that you need to understand and what your role is and what the processes are. And so whether the clinician is just working with a supplier or wants to be a supplier or see, a glimpse of, what the supplier needs to know, um, and they should not, um, how can I put this? They should hold that supplier to a high standard,
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's difficult to do, right? But there are ways to offer, help improve somebody's skills. And, you know, and when I've started, they had just come out with the wheel, and I started providing wheelchairs back in the day. But it was the therapist that I worked with that taught me the things I needed to know. I didn't have a clinical background, and I was fortunate in that they didn't get aggravated with me. They just tried to show me, what they were looking at and explain it to me. And that's how I learned and learned and learned. And so all that was we tried to put into this course in a more concise manner, in a good order that made sense to you. And and so that what took me 10 years to learn, you can learn in that course,
Yeah.
right? And so when a clinician, they're kind of the advocate for their patient or their client,
Yeah.
and they can't lose sight of that working with a supplier.
Yeah.
If the supplier's not doing the right thing, you know, take them aside, have a conversation with them,
Yeah.
and just say, "Hey, I know we can do better than this."
Yeah.
And as a supplier, you should take that as a opportunity to learn more. I need to learn more, and as we all know, you can learn something new every day doing
Yeah,
this.
it's true. On the podcast, we usually have a closing question that I want to ask for both of you to answer. So that question is, can you describe a moment when assistive technology significantly changed a client's life and how it inspired you to think differently about your work?
So I have thought about that, and it's over the 20 years out in the field. Um, a lot of faces pop into my head, and a lot of things I remember. And some of the ones that I felt like were the most impactful were over the smallest tasks. I remembered a little boy that I had helped. I was setting up and fitting him for a mobile stander. And as soon as we had the support set, I didn't have to remind him, there's your brakes, here's how you access your wheels. He was gone. And he had taken off through the kitchen into the pantry so he could go get himself a snack because he knew where they were and he knew where they came from, but he always had to wait for somebody else to meet that need for him. And he was so proud that he could just go and do that for himself. It made me think of another lady who we were delivering and fitting her standing power chair. And she drove into her kitchen and looked into the kitchen sink, and she started to cry because her kids had left dirty dishes in the sink. And she was so excited that she could see them and she could help clean up. And it sounds like these are small things, but these are things that they thought they might never get to do or ever regain. And it was profound for them to have those things back that many other people probably just take for granted.
Yeah. So good. The simple things that we all take for granted that make a really big difference to someone's life. How about you, Weesie?
Yeah, as Andrew said, I've thought of a lot of them. And here's one that is one of my all-time favorites was a little girl in an early intervention program in the school system. And we had been doing a lot of trials with head arrays for children. And I had taken video of one child and brought it into the therapy office to show the clinician. and the little girl was in there. And this is a child that they thought she had visual impairment. They weren't sure about her hearing, and she, she wasn't mobile at all. But apparently she watched the video that I had of her classmate driving this chair. And when it was her turn to do a trial, it, she already knew what to do. It was really, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. And she went on she was an independent driver. She used a header, she used a communication device. She graduated high school. She was an honor student, all that
Wow.
but the thing that was her mother telling me years later, she said, when you and the therapist talked about putting Ashley in a power chair, my husband and I, we thought y'all were crazy.
Wow.
And I said, well, why didn't you say something? And she said, well, we figured y'all knew what you were doing. And I said, well, thank you for that confidence. But being able to give that kid that key, that simple thing that they need that unlocked, her whole world. And as you can imagine, we became fast friends throughout her school career, and I'm sitting here right now wondering what she might be doing now.
Yeah.
And there's there are a million other stories, but that kind of says it
Yeah,
all.
it really does. And that's what we mean by job satisfaction, right? Like that is amazing. I want to thank you both so much for your time today and for coming on and sharing your expertise and sharing your experience with us. And if we've got OTs or physios who are listening to this and they're really interested to know more around iNRRTS and the program we've spoken about, how can they find out more? Do you want to go through just the website they can go to?
Absolutely. They can come check out our website. It's www.NRRTS.org. O-R-D. We have information there on our continuing education, on the CRT Supplier Certificate Program, as well as information within our Directions magazine, the Journal of Complex Rehab Technology. And under our About and Meet Our Staff, our contact information is listed there. So please feel free to reach out with any questions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both again. And I want to say thank you for joining us on the podcast today, and we will catch you in the next one. Bye.